Good afternoon, everyone. This is Dr. Ryan Truchelut of WeatherTiger, and in just a minute I'll be going through the full forecast for you for Tropical Storm Elsa, which is currently paralleling the southwest Florida coastline, and is forecast to make landfall in the eastern portion of Florida's Big Bend tomorrow morning. The entire forecast for you in terms of rain, surge, wind, and tornado threat coming up in a couple minutes. I'm going to allow the audience to filter in for another minute or two, and then I will get started. Okay, so it's been a couple of minutes. I'm going to go ahead and get started with the forecast because there's quite a bit to talk about as Elsa approaches landfall in Florida. So let's start with the key messages from the National Hurricane Center as of the 11 o'clock advisory package issued just 2 hours ago. And these are the key risks that the NHC is highlighting as the threats from Elsa. They're highlighting a flooding threat, both in Cuba as well as across the western portions of the Florida Peninsula, as well as across North Florida. So the rain impact is key. There's also a danger of life-threatening storm surge. The greatest area of danger there extending from Tampa Bay north into eastern portions of Apalachee Bay. They're also highlighting the potential for hurricane-force wind gusts along the western coast of Florida, where a hurricane watch is in effect from roughly Tampa Bay north to Steinhatchee, as well as the broader expectations of tropical storm force wind gusts further north and south along the Florida Gulf Coast. And also, they want to communicate that there is a risk to the southeast coast as well further on in time. So going forward to what the forecast track is, this has not changed very much in the past 24 hours. Current position of Elsa is about 75 miles to the west-northwest of Key West as of 11 a.m., and it's going to continue to track generally north through the day today and then bend north-northeast tomorrow. That should bring it onshore somewhere in the vicinity of Cedar Key, plus or minus 30-40 miles of coastline, sometime tomorrow morning, perhaps late morning, as a strong tropical storm. And if you look at the National Hurricane Center forecast tracks over the past 24 hours, you can see they're all basically right on top of each other. The darker the blue, the more recent the NHC forecast track, and those forecast tracks have been very steady and calling for a landfall right in the eastern portions of Apalachee Bay or the Florida Big Bend region tomorrow morning. So let's take a look at what Elsa looks like this morning. Now, if you read yesterday's forecast, you can recall that I was talking about how the vortex of Elsa is a bit tilted as you go up in the atmosphere. And that continues to be the case today. There have not been major changes in Elsa's organizational state. You can see all these low clouds spiraling around the low-level center of circulation, which I've marked here with an L. But the mid-level center of circulation is displaced to the east by wind shear, changing direction and strength of the winds aloft with height out of the southwest to the northeast. So the vortex is tilted, and that is not generally favorable for significant intensification. So the forecast has not changed much in terms of the strength of Elsa going forward. It's still likely to remain a strong tropical storm for the next 24 hours. So you can see there's a convective burst here on the eastern side of the storm. If you divide straight down the center, there's almost no rainfall here in the western half of the storm. All the activity is kind of north and east of the center in this sort of one big band as it's plowing north as we go through the day today. And that will continue to be the case for the next 24 hours. So the convection will pulse and fade, but I don't think we're talking about this deep convection wrapping all the way around to the western half of the circulation and causing potential for strengthening. If we see that happening, that would be worrisome, but I don't think it's going to happen. The reason why I don't think that's going to happen is if you look at water vapor imagery, this gives you some sense of how much moisture there is aloft in the atmosphere, and these darker colors lurking kind of to the west of Elsa's center of circulation indicate very dry air aloft, and this shear, those upper level winds are pushing that dry air over the center of circulation. So Elsa can't wrap convection all the way around the center, and thus it's not strengthening very much. Maximum sustained winds remain around 60 miles per hour right now. If we take a look at Elsa on radar, again, you can see that asymmetrical structure. A best guess of where the circulation center is probably somewhere in here. You can kind of see those mid-level lows off to the east, kind of an elongated structure of this core band of the strongest winds right in there, kind of lengthened out to the northeast. And all this, but there is a large area of rainfall that's already onshore southwest Florida, and this rain shield is advancing north at about 15 to 20 miles per hour, and it'll be moving into west central Florida later this afternoon. Now, in terms of impacts, we're seeing mostly rain onshore right now. Not a lot of wind outside of the Keys. These bands that are coming through the Keys are doing some sustained tropical storm force winds. We've had wind gusts of up to 70 miles per hour observed this morning in Key West. Not a lot of wind onshore the Fort Myers or Naples vicinity right now, just gusting in the 20 to 30 mile per hour range with that kind of first band of rainfall pushing in. That will increase into the lower range tropical storm force later this afternoon, probably some coastal gusts into the 40 mile per hour ranges we'll get to in a minute. Now, we could use more information on the structure of Elsa, and an Air Force Reserve Hurricane Hunter is currently probing the structure of the storm, determining exactly how tilted the low and mid-level vortex of Elsa is at this time. They're just about to make their first center pass. Here's where the plane is located, and that's where the center of circulation is, and you can see all that convection out here where the strongest winds are to the east. So we'll have more information soon, but they haven't made a center pass yet. This is the best look at what the current wind field looks like, and this area of yellow is the area of tropical storm force wind gusts. So you can see it's just barely touching the shore around Naples, and that should be pushing north up the southwest Florida coast through the afternoon. So we'll be looking at those tropical storm force wind gusts moving in this afternoon for Fort Myers area, Cape Coral, Sarasota into the evening hours tonight. So that's a current look at what Elsa is doing. I want to focus now on the expected impacts, and the way we're going to do that is by walking through forecast guidance that the National Weather Service produces called their Hurricane Threats and Impacts products. And there's four main threats from a tropical cyclone, even a relatively weaker one like Elsa. Those threats are winds, storm surge, flooding rains, and tornadoes. I'm going to start by talking about the storm surge threat because I think it's a bit of a sleeper at this point in terms of impacts, because I think Elsa is actually going to do some fairly significant storm surge impacts here along the Florida Gulf Coast. So these areas that the National Weather Service has outlined in orange, those are the areas where we're looking at potential storm surge flooding above ground height of 3 to 5 feet. The areas in yellow, perhaps more like 1 to 3 feet. And because of that, the National Hurricane Center has issued storm surge warnings, are in effect basically from Fort Myers area through the eastern half of Appalachia Bay. If you're in a storm surge warning area, of course, please monitor your local emergency management information as the best source of guidance for what you should do. But the storm surge warning area does include Tampa Bay, and it also includes Appalachia Bay, the eastern half, where we'll be getting those onshore winds into tomorrow morning. If we look at what the National Hurricane Center is projecting for peak surge, the worst of the surge is likely to be in this west central Florida area, Tampa Bay, as well as north to around Cedar Key. That's the area where we're going to be getting strong winds onshore overnight tonight. This is a forecast model for what the wind field of Elsa may look like around midnight to 2 a.m. tonight. And that water is being pushed up into Tampa Bay. Now these winds are, low-end tropical storm force. We're not talking about a major hurricane here, but the shape of Tampa Bay as well as the shape of these southward-facing coasts in eastern Appalachia Bay, they're going to make for 3 to 5 feet of storm surge, and that's certainly something that needs to be taken seriously. Now, Elsa tracks up this way in the vicinity of Cedar Key. Areas to the west of the track of the center are going to be having offshore winds. The winds are going to be onshore for these south-facing beaches. East of track, west of track, the winds are going to be offshore, and they're also going to be lighter. So surge is going to be much lower here. For areas, say, St. Mark's and west, I don't think this is going to be a major surge event because the winds will be lighter and offshore. Of course, it's something that we'll need to monitor through the night tonight in case the track shifts. But right now, it's the kind of nature coast region of west central Florida that is primed for those surge impacts. High tide for Tampa Bay comes in the morning hours. Tide will be going in basically between midnight and noonish tomorrow. So it's kind of this time frame or overnight that we'll be watching carefully. We're already running maybe half a foot above normal. This is a tide gauge in Old Port Tampa in Tampa Bay. So keeping an eye on the surge threat, of course, because even a couple feet of surge can be life-threatening if you're not preparing for it. Now, the wind threat is obviously what's driving the surge, and that's going to be primarily a coastal threat through west central Florida here, but a little bit of an inland threat as well as we go into eastern portions of the Big Bend and inland North Florida. These areas that the National Weather Service has highlighted in orange here are there places where there's potential for wind gusts of 60 miles an hour or more. The areas in yellow are areas where wind gusts are expected to be up to basically 40 to 60 miles per hour, gusting low-end tropical storm force in some of those bands coming through. But it's the west central Florida coast, nature coast area that's going to be seeing the worst of those impacts. So timing-wise, I think we're talking about, so this is a kind of more detailed look at what the National Weather Service is seeing as the peak wind gusts. And you can see these areas where there's coastal wind gusts and these brownish colors are areas where the winds are over 60 miles per hour, potentially even gusting to low-end hurricane force, which is why hurricane watches are in effect from Steinhatchee down to Bonita Beach. Now, these areas that are seeing these 60, 70 mile per hour wind gusts are right along the coast, as well as up into Tampa Bay. Timing-wise, the worst of the weather is probably going to be between, say, 6 and midnight here, midnight to 6 a.m., kind of along the nature coast, and then north into the Big Bend, eastern half of the Big Bend, as well as inland North Florida, probably sometime between 6 a.m. and noon tomorrow. Now you'll notice that there's a very sharp cutoff here across the eastern panhandle, central portions of the Big Bend, and that's because, as I showed you on the radar and satellite, there's simply not much weather west of the center of circulation. So winds will be much lighter. They'll be coming over land. They'll be going offshore. So, the forecast for wind gusts for Tallahassee, it's pretty light. This is not going to be a big deal for Tallahassee unless the track shifts significantly further west. We're talking wind gusts, 20 to 30 miles per hour, breezy, showery, some rains passing through, but nothing significant. It's this area of the nature coast, inland to potentially Ocala and Gainesville, and then angling northeast as Elsa accelerates around the lunchtime hour inland into Jacksonville and southeast Georgia, where those wind gusts of 50, 60 miles per hour are possible, especially if there's a convective burst right before Elsa is crossing land. So another major threat from Elsa is the flooding rainfall threat, and we're already seeing some of that across southwest Florida as those steady, heavy showers move inland. These areas outlined in red are the areas where the National Weather Service sees the greatest potential for major flash flooding, freshwater flooding, and that also extends further up the coast as well. But this is the area where there's the best potential for, say, 4 to 6 inches of rainfall, and there is some potential in this area outlined in orange as well for localized moderate flash flooding. So, taking a look at the rainfall totals that the National Weather Service is currently projecting, 4 to 6 inches is expected along the west central Florida and southwest Florida coastline, with a broader area of 2 to 4 inches across the eastern portions of the Big Bend, western half of the Florida Peninsula. East of there, for southeast Florida, east central Florida, bandy type stuff, maybe 1-2 inches of rainfall. As I've discussed, west of this sharp cutoff across the eastern portions of the Panhandle, maybe an inch. A lot of this rainfall that we're getting today, and in fact we'll get tomorrow too, across North Florida is not going to be directly associated with Elsa. So much lower potential for flooding Tallahassee and west across the Panhandle. And again, these are the areas that the National Weather Service is forecasting greatest potential of flash flooding. These moderate risk areas centered on Tampa Bay, and then again also across the Georgia and South Carolina coastlines as well. And I just wanted to show, this is one forecast model of what Elsa may be doing tomorrow morning. And here in this model, it's approaching the eastern portions of the Big Bend, eastern Appalachia Bay. But as you can see, we're continuing to have this west-east divide of fairly dry conditions west of the center, and all the heavy rainfall here is north and east of the center because of that wind shear. So again, watch this carefully in Tallahassee. The center won't pass that far to the east in Tallahassee, but close passage of the center doesn't necessarily mean much in the way of significant weather impacts. Keeping an eye on that. I'll be back with another live video tomorrow morning to walk you through landfall and really dig in on what exactly is happening tomorrow morning. Final threat that I want to discuss is tornadoes. Anytime a tropical cyclone is making landfall, you get changing directions of the wind with height, especially east of the center of circulation, in a way that makes quick spin-ups of tornadoes very likely. And again, we saw some of that with Claudette, and we're going to see that again here with Elsa over the course of the day. This area outlined in orange is the greatest risk across central Florida. If we look at current radar, any of these little cells embedded in these bands, you could always get a quick spin up. So you want to have a way of accessing tornado warning information quickly, being ready to take shelter really anywhere across the Florida Peninsula over the next couple of days. Overall, that's about it. I'm going to see if there's any questions. Okay, there's a question of, will Tallahassee be affected? I think I covered that, but just to emphasize, yes, Tallahassee will see some impacts from this, but not in the way of damaging or dangerous weather conditions. You'll want to keep in mind there could be changes to the forecast, but as it stands right now, we're talking about some showers, some storms intermittently passing through Tallahassee overnight tonight through midday tomorrow. Wind gusts 20, 30. Maybe if we get a decent band, you get a wind gust up to 40. But I don't think we're talking about anything widespread or damaging for Tallahassee. For Wakulla County, pretty much the same there. You should have offshore winds. We shouldn't have too much in the way of surge, maybe a foot or two of surge during the time when the winds are out of the east on approach. I expect landfall to occur generally midday-ish tomorrow. I'd say sometime between maybe 9 a.m. and 1 p.m., maybe 9 to noon. Depends on how far. If it ticks a little bit further west, that would be towards the later end of that. If Elsa is stronger, it might tick a little bit east and make landfall a little bit earlier in the sunrise hours tomorrow. But that's the general time frame. I think the worst conditions for North Florida, right in this area, are going to be likely between 6 a.m. and noon. And remember, because the shear is out of the southwest, basically the southwest half of this storm, not a lot there. So that's the timing. What time will the storm surge be in Keaton Beach and Taylor County? Good question. Put this back on the wind field map, and I'll walk you forward through this. Again, this is just one model suggestion. Keaton Beach right about here. The worst of those wind impacts are likely to come in, I think early morning tomorrow, 6 a.m. to 10 a.m. With landfall coming, mid or late morning. It's when Keaton Beach has those onshore winds, 40, 50 miles an hour, gusting potentially up to hurricane force. That's when you'll see the 3 to 5 feet of surge. So morning hours tomorrow, you're going to want to be prepared. If you're in a low-lying area, of course, and you know that, monitor your local emergency management information, as well as, of course, guidance from your local National Weather Service forecast office in Tampa and Tallahassee. They're on top of all the impacts of these storms, and of course, the National Hurricane Center providing the forecast track as your best source of information. So I think I will wrap up there unless there are any further questions. Thank you for watching. I'm Dr. Ryan Truchelut from WeatherTiger. I'll be back with a forecast, a written forecast, kind of walking through region by region what Florida can expect tomorrow, as well as, again, that Facebook Live going live probably sometime around 8:15, 8:30 tomorrow with the very latest on what is happening as Elsa comes inland. So thank you for watching, and keep watching the skies.